Warning: some of the scenes I'll be discussing may be upsetting to younger or more sensitive viewers. Discretion is advised. I remember seeing a trailer for Mother years ago and thinking how it just wasn't for me. When it was selected for the Film Review Open Challenge, I had to remind myself of the trailer, and immediately I wasn't looking forward to it. Mother, released in 2017, has a vague description on Sky Cinema, and the trailer tells me nothing. It looks like a horror movie, which I'm not a fan of unless it has a good or interesting story. The second thing that worried me was the reactions to my announcing Mother as this month's selection. This Facebook screenshot does not fill me with hope. But who knows, maybe I'll find something to enjoy. Here's my review of Mother. The film opens with a woman on fire crying. We then cut to a man placing a glass gem on a stand and the ashes of the house he's in regenerating. He's a poet with writer's block and his wife is renovating the house, but the two seem distant from each other. One day a doctor shows up and instantly befriends the poet. Days later his wife arrives and tries to befriend the poet's wife, but she doesn't like the overly personal questions being asked, and after the doctor and his wife accidentally smash the glass gem, they're asked to leave by the poet's wife. Before they do though, their grown-up sons arrive, arguing before one attacks the other, leaving him bleeding from the head on the floor. The poet, the doctor and his wife take the son to hospital, with the poet later returning alone, stating he didn't survive his injuries. In the middle of the night, the poet's wife is woken by noise downstairs. The poet has organised a wake for the doctor's son, which quickly gets out of hand as the poet's wife is ignored again and again. She orders everyone out of the house, which leads to a fight between her and the poet that ends, as all good marital fights do, in sex. The next morning, she instinctively knows she's pregnant, which inspires the poet to break his writer's block and create something that she describes as beautiful and perfect. Skip forward to a very heavily pregnant wife preparing to enjoy a quiet evening with her husband, the poet, to celebrate the baby's arrival and his book being the fastest-selling book in history. Their night is interrupted by his fans, who initially stay outside, but things escalate very quickly. They get in, they steal, they fight, they war, they execute, they human traffic, all within the house, and all whilst the wife is getting caught up in the middle. The wife then goes into labour, but thankfully the poet finds her and takes her to a room where she gives birth to a baby boy. However, after the evening she's had, she will not hand over her son to the poet. She holds him whilst the poet stares at her for hours and hours. The second she falls asleep, the poet takes the child to the waiting crowd outside. The crowd take the boy despite the screaming protests of the wife. The crowd hold the baby up high, but too many hands leads to the baby's neck snapping. The crowd end up eating the baby's body, with the wife begging them to stop. This ends up being the point at which the wife loses control and attacks the crowd with a piece of broken glass. The crowd fight back and nearly kill her, but the poet steps in again and insists that she forgive them. The wife then runs to the basement and blows up the house and ignites everything, including herself, similar to the first scene. As she dies, the poet, unharmed, asks for her love, to which she agrees. He puts his hand in her chest and pulls out her shriveling heart, squeezes it tight, and makes a replacement glass gem. The house regenerates as before, and the cycle starts again. So in case it wasn't obvious yet, this film is a religious allegory. The penny dropped for me when the mob started eating the baby, being a literal metaphor for the communion bread. At this point, the doctor and his wife, Adam and Eve, their sons, one that kills the other, Cain and Abel, it all makes sense. This is then bullet pointed by nobody in the film being named, and in the credits, Javier Bardem's character of the poet just simply being called him with a capital H. I'm no religious expert, and some things to me I just didn't quite get the symbolism. The bleeding hole in the floor, the secret room in the basement, the yellow medicine, all of this goes unanswered. Does the symbolism work for the movie? Yes, mostly. Being literal with some things works, but much like my analysis of, say, nocturnal animals, if you don't understand everything being said or every interpretation, it can leave a viewer confused by what they've seen. I'm not a complicated guy. I'm much happier when a film is being literal with me and not symbolic. That's why I didn't really get on with Nocturnal Animals, and it's why I don't really get on with Mother. In fact, my view is very much like YouTuber and inspiration to me, Some Call Me Johnny, when he says,
I'm not what you would call sophisticated. You can go into extreme detail about how this sandwich right here is made from the finest quality meats and cheeses that are only available when the planets align, and that the creator of the sandwich meant for it to be enjoyed in a specific manner. Meanwhile, while the person was explaining all that, I already ate the damn thing because it's food and I was hungry.
That shocking moment was almost immediately watered down or dissipated, where moments later I understood the symbolism. But it also made me care less about the characters, as they're not literal people, only symbolic of a religious story. I've never been enamored with Jennifer Lawrence, but then I've only really seen her in the X-Men movies, where she's blue most of the time. I think she does an okay job here, certainly not deserving of the Golden Raspberry nomination for Worst Actress, especially as in the same year Dakota Johnson got nominated for 50 Shades Darker. Cough, cough, review link in the corner, cough, cough. At the same time though, it's not a performance that warrants praise or adulation. Javier Bardem as him, or the poet, does better, but again, nothing spectacular. To play a messiah that cares more about what other people think than his wife is a tough role to play, however. How on earth do you direct that? Speaking of direction, Darren Aronofsky's use of a free cam and focus on Jennifer Lawrence's character certainly puts the focus on the titular character, much like the only other Aronofsky film I've seen, The Wrestler, which is a less religious, more story-based movie, and perhaps why I enjoyed that a lot more. Aronofsky, it seems, wants us to feel for the lead as their story culminates, and in Mother's case, had I got the allegory sooner, I might have felt her plight. Unfortunately, because of the literal nature of how biblical events are depicted, I was left stumped right up until the ending. Don't get me wrong, the baby dying in the crowd shocked me. I had my jaw dropped at that moment, but then the realization hit me, and suddenly I was less shocked. I couldn't sleep well afterwards, but the context helped. Gritty and visceral visuals and a feeling of hopelessness and despair for her were helped by not really having much of a soundtrack. Selfishly, this does kind of make my review very difficult to do because I do like to use official soundtrack to build atmosphere, but I found some great royalty-free pieces and I suggest that you give the artist a look. Some of these pieces are really exquisite. The one song that is used, The End of the World, is played over the credits and it's alright. I was still in a bit of aftershock during the credit sequence and so the music washed over me at that time, but it is a nice song and a good way to end. Mother was hard to watch and even harder to review. Based on what Darren Aronofsky says, that's the point. This film is effective in what it tries to do by shocking the viewer, but this is another example of a film trying to be artistic, and that kind of film just doesn't appeal to me. I didn't enjoy the way it made me feel, and as a film, I wouldn't watch it again. Not a bad film, just very much not for me. Next up for the Film Review Open Challenge is Bridesmaids. For now though, thank you very much for watching.
Why does the sea rush to shore? Don't they know?